Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I'm diving into the latest economic turbulence in the US, triggered by President Donald Trump's abrupt policy shifts. Let's break it down. The US economy just had its worst quarter since 2022. Gross domestic product, or GDP, registered at an annualized rate of minus 0.3% in the first quarter, according to the Commerce Department. That's a significant drop from the 2.4% rate in the previous quarter and much worse than the 0.8% rate economists had projected. So, what's causing this economic slump? The Trump administration's chaotic tariff spree, particularly against China, has escalated trade tensions and unsettled both consumers and businesses. Most economists agree that these trade policies are likely to push inflation up and could even trigger a recession. President Trump, however, isn't taking the blame. He's pointed fingers at what he calls the Biden overhang, claiming that the weak numbers are a legacy issue. He insists that once the dust settles, the economy will boom like never before. Digging into the numbers, the decline was largely driven by a wider trade deficit. Americans rushed to buy goods before the tariffs hit, causing imports to skyrocket by 41.3%. Meanwhile, exports only grew by 1.8%. When imports exceed exports, it subtracts from GDP, and this was the biggest drag on growth since records began in 1947. Trump's top trade advisor, Peter Navarro, called the GDP report the best negative print of his life. He argues that the markets should look at the sharp increase in domestic investment last quarter. However, much of this investment came from businesses stockpiling ahead of the tariffs. There were also signs of weakness in consumer spending, which powers about 70% of the US economy. It slowed sharply to a 1.8% rate, down from 4% in the previous quarter. Government spending also took a hit, dropping to minus 5.1%. On the flip side, business investment expanded at a 9.8% rate, up from minus 3% in the fourth quarter. Interestingly, while this GDP report points to a weaker economy, it doesn't necessarily mean we're in a recession just yet. Unemployment remains relatively low at 4.2%, businesses are still investing, and consumer spending hasn't collapsed entirely. However, the economy could quickly worsen, especially if Trump continues his tariff blitz. Gregory Dacco, chief economist at Ernst & Young, warns that while we can't call it a recession yet, we're on a razor-thin edge. The longer these tariffs remain, the more likely an economic downturn becomes. Adding to the uncertainty, a separate report noted a sharp drop in hiring by U.S. businesses. Employers added just 62,000 jobs in April, down from 147,000 in March. Nella Richardson, chief economist at ADP, said employers are struggling to reconcile policy and consumer uncertainty with mostly positive economic data. Remember, a recession is typically defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP, which hasn't happened yet. The National Bureau of Economic Research officially declares recessions, but their call can come months after one starts. That's all for today. Keep an eye on these developments as the economic landscape continues to shift. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more in-depth analysis. See you next time.